There's a certain kind of man who doesn't belong anywhere, not because he's rejected, but because he outgrows the places he enters. He walks into groups, workplaces, circles, and relationships, but something in him never blends. It's not rebellion, it's not arrogance, it's awareness. He sees the game too clearly to pretend he's part of it. While others bond over illusions, he's busy studying the architecture behind them. That's why the Sigma man rarely fits in. He sees too much to stay comfortable and feels too deeply to play along. You don't fail to fit in, you outgrow the need to. Fitting in isn't just about belonging, it's about buying into a shared script, rules, patterns, expectations that keep groups intact. But for the Sigma, those scripts are transparent. He can't unknow what he sees. That's why sooner or later every environment begins to feel too small for him. The Sigma man's detachment isn't born from pride, it's born from perception. He reads the subtle motives behind conformity, how people trade authenticity for safety, how they suppress truth for approval. While most find comfort in fitting in, he finds suffocation. The more he understands human nature, the more he realizes that most belonging comes at a price: silence, compromise, or self-erasure. He stops chasing inclusion not because he dislikes people, but because he refuses to lose himself in the crowd. For him, connection has to be real or it's meaningless. The paradox is that his independence draws people in even as it separates him. Everyone wants his calm, but few can handle his clarity. He fits in nowhere, yet leaves his imprint everywhere. The more you understand people, the harder it becomes to stand among them. Upcoming are 10 grounded truths, not fantasies, about why Sigma men never truly fit in, and why eventually they stop trying. 1. He sees how conformity breeds comfort, not growth. Most people join groups to feel safe. They synchronize opinions, mirror behaviors, and call it unity. The Sigma sees this pattern instantly. He notices how belonging often requires shrinking, lowering standards, softening edges, and suppressing individuality for harmony's sake. He doesn't judge it, he just can't participate. For him, safety bought with self-betrayal is a loss, not a win. Comfort built on compromise feels like rot. Fitting in demands a kind of blindness he's incapable of. The crowd rewards compliance, not clarity. He knows that blending in is the tax people pay for approval, and that cost feels too high. While others crave comfort, he craves authenticity, even if it means standing alone. 2. He reads social games too clearly to play them. Every group has its politics, the subtle hierarchy, the alliances, the flattery traded like currency. Most play these games instinctively, without realizing it. But the Sigma's perception exposes the mechanisms behind the mask. He sees the power dynamics, the invisible scoreboards, the manipulation disguised as friendship. When you see the strings, the puppet show loses its charm. He can't unsee the game, and because of that, he stops playing. He communicates plainly, acts directly, and refuses to barter truth for acceptance. In a world built on coded interactions, that honesty feels disruptive. People call him detached, cold, or blunt, but in reality, he just doesn't know how to pretend. 3. He's too independent to depend on group validation. Fitting in requires a collective identity, finding self-worth in how others perceive you. The Sigma's sense of value comes from solitude and discipline, not applause. He's built his foundation internally, which makes external approval optional. This independence, though healthy, creates distance. Groups thrive on shared reinforcement. They bond through mutual validation. But the Sigma doesn't need it, and that unnerves people who do. His indifference to external judgment feels like defiance in a world addicted to approval. The man who doesn't need the crowd becomes invisible to it and feared by it. His power lies in detachment. He doesn't rebel to be different, he simply doesn't depend. And independence in a culture built on validation looks like disobedience. 4. He values depth in a world obsessed with performance. Small talk, posturing, social rituals, they exhaust him. Not because he lacks social skill, but because he finds shallowness mentally expensive. The Sigma isn't interested in maintaining appearances or playing polite theater. He prefers silence to pretense. He seeks meaningful exchange, ideas, perspective, truth, but most social settings trade in surface currency. That mismatch makes him withdraw, not out of arrogance, but self-respect. Depth doesn't isolate you, it filters who can reach you. When depth becomes rare, solitude becomes refuge. He stops trying to fit in because he realizes most conversations are performances, not connections. 5. He outgrows environments that reward noise over substance. The Sigma quickly learns that many spaces celebrate visibility, not value. Those who shout loudest get attention, while those who think deeply are overlooked. The loud thrive, the aware observe. He sees that most groups are driven by momentum, not meaning by trends, not truth. And when he recognizes that the metrics of success are shallow, his interest fades. Popularity is the applause of the distracted. He leaves not in bitterness, but clarity. He'd rather build in silence than compete in noise. Over time, fitting in starts to feel like participation in a losing game. 6. He understands the fragility of collective morality. In groups, morality often bends to majority comfort. What's right becomes what's accepted. The Sigma sees this moral elasticity and refuses to participate. He doesn't measure right and wrong by consensus, but by principle. The crowd calls conviction arrogance when it exposes their convenience. He'd rather be labeled difficult than compliant. To him, integrity matters more than inclusion. That makes him inconvenient in spaces that thrive on silence. So he detaches not to rebel, but to protect his clarity. Belonging at the cost of honesty feels like self-betrayal. 7. His emotional independence threatens emotional dependency. Groups often survive through emotional interdependence, shared outrage, shared excitement, shared approval. But the Sigma regulates himself internally. He doesn't outsource mood or identity to others. That balance makes him reliable, but it also alienates him. People misread his emotional steadiness as apathy. In truth, it's discipline. He's learned to separate emotion from reaction, empathy from attachment. And because he doesn't feed collective emotion, people find him hard to relate to. Emotional control looks cold to those who need chaos to feel alive. He doesn't match the crowd's rhythm, and eventually he stops trying to. He'd rather be misunderstood than emotionally manipulated. 8. He realizes fitting in requires dulling the edges that define him. Every environment has unspoken rules: what you can say, how you should act, what's acceptable. To fit in, you soften your truths, edit your honesty, and sand down your edges. The Sigma refuses that process. He's not interested in blending through dilution. The traits that make him stand out, independence, clarity, restraint, are the same ones that make him incompatible with conformity. You can't keep your edge and stay inside the box. So he steps out. Not in rebellion, but in preservation. He knows the cost of belonging if it means losing the texture that makes him real. 9. He learns that most belonging is conditional. In time, he sees that acceptance often depends on compliance. Groups tolerate difference until it threatens uniformity. The Sigma experiences this firsthand. He's celebrated when useful, dismissed when honest. It teaches him that fitting in isn't belonging, it's conditional access. Acceptance that can be revoked isn't acceptance, it's management. Once he understands that, he detaches fully. He stops seeking validation from people who only value him when he's convenient. True belonging, he realizes, can't be negotiated. It must exist without control. And since that kind of space is rare, he creates his own. 10. He finds freedom in not belonging. Eventually, the Sigma learns that not fitting in isn't a flaw, it's liberation. He stops measuring his worth by inclusion. He builds his own rhythm, his own environment, his own rules. What once felt like exile becomes empowerment. Freedom begins the moment you stop needing to be understood. He no longer explains, conforms, or auditions for belonging. His solitude becomes strength, his distance becomes focus. The world reads it as withdrawal. He knows it's alignment. When you stop trying to fit in, you start fitting with yourself, and that's the only belonging that lasts. On a final note, the Sigma man doesn't reject society out of disdain. He simply stops pretending it fits. His detachment isn't rebellion, it's clarity. He's not above the world, he's just done shrinking to fit its frames. The truth is, Once you see how most belonging demands self-erasure, you stop craving it. He doesn't walk alone because he's unwanted. He walks alone because he's awake. In the end, he learns that the point was never to fit in, it was to stand firm.